Tonight, when the calendar on your phone flips to January, you are going to feel a sense of renewal. You will write down your goals, you will promise yourself that this year will be different, but the date is just an arbitrary number. The real answer is far stranger. For 99% of human history, your ancestors had no calendars. They had no phones. They had no written numbers to mark the passing of a year. Yet, they knew exactly when the cycle was ending. They knew exactly when to celebrate. They knew without a single clock. How did they know? To understand this, you have to look at the sky. You think of time as a straight line. You think it moves from left to right. Your brain does not naturally think that way. Your brain thinks in circles. Your ancestors did not track days. They tracked light. In the ancient world, the sun was the ultimate ruler. As winter approached, the sun rose lower in the sky, the days grew shorter, the nights grew longer, the cold crept in, food became scarce. To your primitive ancestors, the fading sun was a matter of life or death. They watched the horizon every single morning. They marked the exact spot where the sun rose. They watched it drift further south day by day. Then, one day, it stopped. The sun halted its descent. It rested on the horizon for 3 days. This is the winter solstice, the turning point, the promise that the light would return. This was the original New Year. But they did not just guess. They built massive, precise instruments to measure it. Thousands of years before the first mechanical clock, humans were engineering landscapes to catch the light. Consider Newgrange in Ireland. It is a massive earthen mound built over 5,000 years ago. It is older than the Egyptian pyramids. It looks like a simple grass hill. But once a year, on the winter solstice, something incredible happens. The rising sun shoots a perfect beam of light through a small roof box above the entrance. The light travels down a narrow passage. It illuminates a dark inner chamber for exactly 17 minutes. Then it vanishes. For the people who built it, that 17 minutes of light was the new year. It was the confirmation that the sun was returning. The cycle was beginning again. Anthony Aveni, an archaeoastronomer, has spent his life studying these ancient structures. He proved that early humans were obsessive timekeepers, but they were not tracking abstract numbers. They were tracking the physical behavior of the universe. Aveni also studied the Maya in Mesoamerica. The Maya were obsessed with time. They tracked the planet Venus. They believed time was a burden carried by the gods, passed from one to another when a cycle ended. They built pyramids that acted as giant sundials. El Castillo at Chichen Itza has exactly 365 steps. Twice a year, the sun creates a shadow of a serpent slithering down the pyramid. Time was a living entity. Time was a god. They did not just watch the sky. They mapped the complex orbital dances to survive. In Egypt, they tracked the star Sirius. The heliacal rising of Sirius, its first appearance on the horizon after months of being hidden, coincided exactly with the annual flooding of the Nile. The flood brought the fertile soil, the soil brought the food, the appearance of the star meant survival. The new year was literally written in the stars, tied directly to the earth. But how did they track the smaller cycles? How did they know a new month had passed? They watched the moon. The moon is the most obvious clock in the sky. It waxes, it wanes, it disappears. It returns. Alexander Marshak, an independent scholar, made a discovery that changed how we view early humans. He examined a bone plaque found in the Blanchard Cave in France. It was 30,000 years old. It looked like a piece of carved ivory, but under a microscope, Marshak realized it was a calendar. The carvings were not random art. They were a meticulous, day-by-day record of the phases of the moon. Different tools were used for different phases. Your Ice Age ancestors were tracking the lunar cycle. They were counting the days between full moons. They were marking the months long before the word month existed. Yet, there is a problem. The lunar cycle is 29.5 days. The solar cycle is 365 days. They do not match. 12 lunar months is only 354 days. An 11-day gap exists. If you only follow the moon, your calendar drifts. Your spring festivals will end up in winter. Your ancestors had to reconcile the sky. They had to sync the moon with the sun. This is why leap months and intercalary days were invented. This is why ancient societies spent so much energy observing the heavens. They were keeping time from falling apart. But you do not need to look at monuments to see how they knew the year was changing. You can look at your own body. You have a biological clock inside you. Russell Foster, a neuroscientist, studies circadian rhythms. He points out that your brain is deeply sensitive to the changing length of daylight. Deep within your hypothalamus sits the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It is a tiny cluster of cells. It receives direct input from your eyes. Your eye contains a special set of photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells do not help you see shapes or colors. They exist solely to measure light. They send data directly to the brain's clock. They track the exact ratio of light to dark. When the days shorten, your brain knows. It alters your hormones. It increases melatonin production. You feel more sluggish. You sleep longer. Your metabolism shifts to conserve energy. Your ancestors did not need a calendar to tell them winter was coming. Their bodies told them. The shift in light triggered a cascade of biological changes. They felt the season changing in their bones. They felt the year dying. They felt the solstice arriving. The new year was a physiological event, not just a mental concept. When the light finally began to return, their bodies responded. The slow drop in melatonin lifted their mood. The return of the light brought a burst of energy. The desire to celebrate, to feast, to gather was driven by brain chemistry. You still feel this today. You call it seasonal affective disorder. When the light leaves, when the light returns, you feel a natural urge to go outside, to move, to start fresh. So why do you celebrate the new year in the dead of winter? Because your biology is still responding to the solstice. You are still programmed to celebrate the return of the light. But the physical world is not the only way they track time. They track time through their own actions. For hunter-gatherers, time was not a grid of empty squares waiting to be filled. Time was a sequence of tasks. Time was a cycle of migrations. A new month did not begin with a number. It began with an event. The month the salmon returned. The month the berries ripened. The month the herd moved south. These were the calendar markers. The event was the date. When the first thunderstorm of spring rolled in, that was the new year. When the ice broke on the river, that was the new year. They did not ask what day it was. They asked what was happening. This is called ecological time. The environment provided the cues. The environment provided the calendar. For a coastal tribe, the calendar was the tide. For a plains tribe, the calendar was the migration of the buffalo. When the event did not happen, time felt broken. If the salmon did not arrive, it was not just a famine. It was a temporal disruption. The cycle had stopped. Your ancestors lived in a state of hyper-attunement to their environment. They could smell the change in the seasons. They could hear the shifts in bird calls. They knew the year was turning because the world around them told them in 1,000 different sensory languages. When humans settled down and started farming, the cues changed. The calendar became about soil and seeds. The new year was tied to planting and harvesting. In Mesopotamia, the New Year festival of Akitu happened in the spring. It was tied to the barley harvest. They did not celebrate the year turning because of an arbitrary date. They celebrated because the food was ready. The survival of the community was secured for another cycle. Time was food. Food was time. But today, you live in a world of artificial light. You live in a world of temperature control. You have severed the physical connection between the environment and your body. You do not wake up with the sun. You do not go to sleep with the dark. Your phone tells you the date. Your thermostat tells you the season. Because of this, time has become abstract. It has become a source of anxiety. You feel time slipping away. You feel like you are running out of it. You measure your life in seconds and minutes. Your ancestors did not. They measured their lives in cycles. They measured their lives in the return of the geese. They measured their lives in the depth of the snow. They did not fear time passing. They welcomed it. The passing of time meant survival. Another winter survived. Another harvest completed. Another cycle fulfilled. You feel a pressure to achieve before a certain age. You feel a pressure to maximize every second. This is a modern disease. Your ancestors had no concept of wasting time. Time was not a resource to be spent. Time was the rhythm of the earth. You moved with it. You rested when the earth rested. You celebrated when the earth bloomed. When they celebrated the new year, they were not just partying. They were participating in the renewal of the universe. The winter solstice festivals were desperate, joyful attempts to coax the sun back. They lit massive bonfires. They brought green branches indoors to symbolize life persisting in the dead of winter. They made noise. They sang. They were reminding the sun not to forget them. They were cheering for the light. The new year was a profound existential relief. The darkness had won, but only for a moment. The light was returning. The world was not ending. You still carry the echo of this in your modern celebrations. You string up lights on your house. You stay up all night. You make noise at midnight. You are participating in a ritual that is older than agriculture. You are participating in a ritual that is older than civilization. You are cheering for the light to return. But you have forgotten why you are doing it. You think it is just a party. You think January 1st is just a day to make resolutions. It is not. It is a biological imperative. It is an ancient, deeply human need to acknowledge the turning of the invisible cycles that govern your existence. Your ancestors knew the new year had arrived because the sky told them, the earth told them, their bodies told them. They did not need a clock. They were the clock. The modern calendar is a marvel of engineering. It is a triumph of human intellect. It keeps the entire globe synchronized, but it has disconnected you from the rhythm of your own life. You look down at your devices to see what time it is. Your ancestors looked up, they looked at the stars, they looked at the horizon, they felt the temperature shift. If you want to keep exploring the hidden programs running your brain, make sure to hit subscribe. Your subconscious will thank you. When you wake up tomorrow, your calendar will say, a new year has begun. You will write down your goals. You will promise yourself that this year will be different. But as you look at the numbers on your screen, remember what you are actually measuring. You are measuring the tilt of the earth. You are measuring the return of the light. You are participating in a ritual that your ancestors began 100,000 years ago. Tonight, when the calendar on your phone flips to January, you will feel a sense of renewal. But remember, the date is just a number. The real new year is the light returning to your eyes.